Some stories begin with cruelty. Not the loud, violent kind, the quiet kind, the kind where someone simply sets something down and walks away. This is one of those stories. It begins on an ordinary afternoon, in an ordinary city, inside an ordinary taxi. Nothing about that day seemed unusual at first. The roads were busy. The air smelled of exhaust and rain. A driver named Raza picked up a passenger, drove him to his destination, and said goodbye. But when the cab fell quiet and Raza reached back to check the seat, something changed. Something small moved inside a cardboard box. Something soft breathed in the dark. A puppy, barely a week old, left behind like a forgotten jacket. What followed was not a dramatic rescue. It was something quieter than that. It was a man choosing, day after day, to keep caring. It was a tiny animal learning, slowly, that not all hands reach out to push away. Some reach out to hold. This is the story of that puppy, of the days he spent in a cardboard box and then in gentle hands, of the moment a stranger discovered he had been abandoned on purpose, and of the unexpected truth that sometimes being left behind is the first step toward finally being found. You do not need to rush through this. Let it come slowly, because the story, like the love at the center of it, was never meant to be hurried. The city moved the way cities always move in the late afternoon, with a kind of tired urgency, like everyone needed somewhere to be but no one was quite sure why. Raza had been driving since early morning, 8 hours behind the wheel, in and out of traffic, picking up strangers and dropping them off again, one after another. He knew this city the way drivers know things, not the names of streets, but the rhythms. He knew when the school buses slowed the east side. He knew which roads pooled with water after rain. He knew the silence that fell over the passenger seat, around 5 in the evening when people were too tired to talk. He was a quiet man by nature, not unfriendly, just measured. He spoke when spoken to, smiled at his regulars, kept the cab clean and smelling faintly of the pine air freshener his daughter had given him. He was 51 years old. He had been driving for 11 years. He had seen everything and nothing. Or so he thought. The passenger he picked up that afternoon was unremarkable at first. He was waiting at a bus stop near the city center, standing rather than sitting, as though he hadn't planned to be there long. He was well dressed. That was the first thing Raza noticed. Pressed trousers, a collared shirt with the top button fastened despite the warmth, shoes that caught the light when he stepped off the curb. He looked like a man who cared about how he appeared in the world. He was carrying a box. Nothing unusual about that, Raza thought. People carry all sorts of things into cabs, grocery bags, briefcases, flowers, furniture pieces, too awkward for a bus. The box was plain cardboard, not large, sealed at the top with a flap folded over rather than taped. It sat easily on the man's lap when he settled into the back seat. Raza pulled into traffic. They did not talk. That was fine. Some passengers wanted conversation, and some did not. This man stared out the window with the focused, distant expression of someone working through something privately. His hand rested on top of the box, not gripping it, just resting there, almost absently. The ride took about 20 minutes. The destination was a residential area, quieter streets, taller buildings set back from the road, a corner shop with its awning, half lowered. The passenger directed Raza to stop just past a small intersection, in the shade of a wall. He paid. He thanked Raza. He got out. Raza watched him in the rearview mirror. The man straightened his shirt. He walked around the corner without looking back. The cab was quiet again. Raza had another pickup waiting 2 streets over. He reached to adjust the radio volume, then paused. Something made him turn and look at the back seat. The box was still there. He blinked. He looked at the corner where the man had disappeared, then back at the box. He forgot it, Raza thought immediately. He was distracted, maybe. He'll realize and come back. He waited a moment, then another. No one came. He put the car in park and turned around properly to look at the box. It was sitting in the middle of the seat, tilted slightly against the backrest. The folded flap at the top had shifted during the ride, leaving a small gap along one edge. Raza leaned over and gently peeled the flap open. He looked inside, and the world, for a moment, became very still. Curled at the bottom of the box, on a thin, folded cloth, was the smallest dog he had ever seen. It wasn't sleeping. It was awake. Its eyes were barely open, filmed with that milky newborn look, unseeing and yet somehow alert to warmth. Its legs moved in slow, uncoordinated pedaling motions. Its chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. It made no sound. It did not need to. Raza sat back and pressed his hand to his mouth. He looked at the corner again, empty. He looked at his phone. He had a pickup waiting. He had a family at home. He had an evening ahead of him that had not included this. He looked back at the puppy. The puppy, in its slow and helpless way, moved its head slightly toward the warmth of the open flap, toward the faint light in the air, and made a sound so quiet it was almost not a sound at all. Something shifted in Raza's chest, something that did not have a name. He did not drive to his next pickup. He sat for a long moment in the parked cab on a quiet city street, with a tiny puppy in a cardboard box, and a question forming slowly in his mind. Not yet urgent, not yet heavy, but there. What am I supposed to do now? He would not know the answer for several days, but that was how it began. Not with a crisis, not with a dramatic turn, with a box and a breath, and an ordinary man who had not been looking for anything had found something anyway. The next morning, Raza returned to the same street corner, hoping to find the passenger. What he discovered instead was something he had not yet allowed himself to fully consider. That first night was not easy. Raza had driven home slowly, keeping the box on the passenger seat where he could see it, one hand reaching over at red lights to make sure the cloth inside was still warm. The puppy had made small sounds during the drive. Not crying exactly, but something between a breath and a whimper, as though the world outside was more information than it could process. His wife, Sana, met him at the door and stopped when she saw what he was carrying. He explained quickly. She listened without interrupting. She was that kind of woman. When he finished, she reached into the box with gentle hands, looked at the puppy for a long time, and said simply that it needed warmth and something to eat. They did not have puppy formula. They did not have a bottle small enough. They did their best with what they had. Diluted warm milk drawn carefully into a syringe they found in the back of a medicine drawer, offered drop by drop while Sana held the tiny body against her palm. The puppy took it slowly, unevenly. Its tongue moved more instinct than skill. It survived the night. In the morning, Raza drove back to the street corner. He told himself it was certainly an accident. A man like that, pressed and careful and deliberate in how he held himself, did not simply forget something. There must have been confusion. Maybe the box had slid behind the seat. Maybe he hadn't realized until he arrived home. Maybe he was looking for the cab right now, calling dispatch, worried. These were the stories Raza told himself as he parked near the intersection and waited. The morning was cool and gray. Shopkeepers were opening their shutters. A woman swept the entrance to a building. Two boys walked past with school bags on their backs, arguing quietly. A cat watched from a ledge above the corner shop. No passenger. Raza waited an hour. He asked the shopkeeper on the corner if he recognized the man, pressed shirt, well-dressed, middle-aged. The shopkeeper shook his head. He asked the woman sweeping. She looked up, thought for a moment, said she had seen a man like that once or twice, but not regularly. Not a resident. Maybe a visitor. Raza wrote his phone number on a small card and gave it to both of them. If you see him, he said, please tell him to call me. He left something important. He drove to the shelter on the other side of the city before work that morning. Not to leave the puppy, not yet, but to ask. He wanted to know what to feed it, how often, how to keep it warm. The woman at the front desk was kind and unhurried. She showed him a proper bottle, explained the feeding schedule for a puppy this young, gave him a small bag of specialized formula. She wrote the instructions on a piece of paper in clear, careful handwriting. How old? She asked. Maybe a week, Raza said. Maybe less. She nodded. Her expression said something that her words did not. Bring it back if you need to, she said. We'll take care of it. He thanked her and left. That day, he drove his routes with the box in the front passenger seat, wrapped now in a soft towel Sana had folded carefully that morning. He fed the puppy at every break, pulling over, lifting it gently, tilting the small bottle. The puppy ate with increasing certainty. It was learning the shape of this routine, the warmth of these hands. Between fares, he checked his phone. No calls from the shopkeeper. No unknown numbers. He returned to the corner the following morning. And the morning after that, on the third day, a woman across the street leaned out of a window and told him that a man matching his description had come by the building twice in the past year, visiting someone on the upper floors. Not a resident, a visitor. She did not know his name. Raza thanked her and sat in his cab for a while. He was beginning to feel the first edge of something uncomfortable, a thought he did not want to complete. Because completing it would change things, and things were already complicated enough. The puppy, meanwhile, was changing, not dramatically. This was not that kind of story, but day by day, in small accumulations, it was becoming more present. Its eyes were opening further each morning, adjusting slowly to light. It had begun to respond to warmth with something that resembled recognition. A slight turn of the head toward Raza's palm, a settling of the body when it was held close. It made sounds now, faint and irregular, that seemed to mean something. It was beginning to trust. Raza noticed this and tried not to think too hard about what it meant, because he was still telling himself that the passenger was coming back, that this was temporary, that by the end of the week, there would be a knock on his car window and a relieved voice, and the whole thing would resolve itself quietly. He still believed that. Almost. Days passed, and then a week, and still no one came looking for the small life that had been left behind. Raza began to feel the weight of a question he had been avoiding. What did he truly want to happen next? A week passed, then another. Raza still returned to the corner every few days, less out of expectation now, and more out of something he could not yet name. Habit, perhaps, or a kind of reluctant honesty, making sure he had truly tried before he allowed himself to stop. The shopkeeper recognized him now. Still nothing, he would say before Raza even asked, and Raza would nod and thank him and return to his car. The puppy was 2 weeks old by then. Perhaps a little more. It had changed in the way all very young things change, in small, constant, almost imperceptible increments that only become visible when you step back and compare where you are to where you began. Its body had filled out slightly. The loose, puppyish skin had tightened just enough to suggest the shape beneath it. Its legs, which had moved in that uncoordinated swimming gesture when it was newborn, now pressed against surfaces with something closer to intention. Its eyes were open, dark, wet, uncertain, but open. And when those eyes found Raza, when he reached into the box and the puppy turned its head toward his hand, there was something there that was not just reflex. Raza did not talk about this to many people. His wife knew. She had watched the whole thing happen quietly from the beginning without making too much of it. She fed the puppy when Raza was driving. She changed the cloth in the box when it needed changing. She did these things without announcement, as though they had always been part of her day. His colleague Tariq, who parked beside him at the taxi stand, noticed the box on the passenger seat one afternoon and leaned in through the window to look. "It's a puppy," Tariq said. "Yes," said Raza. "Where did you get it?" Raza told him. Tariq listened with wide eyes, then shook his head slowly. "Someone left a newborn puppy in your cab?" "Yes." "On purpose?" "I don't know yet," Raza said, and at that point, he still wasn't sure that was a lie. He had been to the shelter a second time that week. The same woman at the desk, her name was Fatima, had checked the puppy over carefully, weighed it, listened to its heart. Everything was as it should be, she said. Considering, she asked again whether he intended to surrender it. Raza hesitated. "I'm still looking for the owner," he said. Fatima nodded. Her expression was careful and kind, the way people look when they have seen a situation many times and understand its gravity without pressing too hard on it. "The puppy is doing well because of you," she said. "Whatever you decide." He drove home that evening with the box on the seat beside him and the city moving past the windows in its usual hurry, and he thought about that sentence. Whatever you decide, as though there were a decision being made, as though it were already, in some way, in motion. At home that night, after Sana had gone to bed, Raza sat in the kitchen with the puppy on his lap. This was new. The puppy on his lap rather than in the box. It had happened by accident a few nights earlier, when he had lifted it out to feed it and simply not put it back right away. It had settled against his thigh and gone still, and he had sat there not moving for a long time. He did it again now. The puppy slept. Its breathing was even. Its small sides rose and fell. Raza had a grown daughter who lived 2 neighborhoods over and visited on weekends. He had a younger brother who sent messages from abroad once a month. He had his routes, his regulars, his pine air freshener, his 11 years of knowing the city's rhythms. He had a full life. He had not thought of it as an empty one. But sitting in his kitchen at midnight with a sleeping puppy on his lap, he found himself very quiet inside. There is a kind of waiting that has no destination, that is simply what it is, a suspension between what was and what might be. Raza had been in that suspension for 2 weeks, telling himself it was temporary, telling himself the passenger would return, telling himself the right thing and the easy thing were the same. They were not the same. He looked at the puppy. He thought about what it meant that no one had called, that no one had come, that in 2 weeks of checking, asking, returning, leaving his number, not one person had said, "That dog belongs to someone who is looking for it." He was beginning to understand what that meant. He was beginning to understand, too, what he felt about it, and that feeling surprised him, because it was not quite what he expected. He expected to feel burdened. He felt something closer to territorial. He did not want to examine that feeling too closely yet. Not quite yet, he thought. The puppy shifted in its sleep. One small paw pressed against Raza's hand. He did not move away. There was still one thing left to do. One last attempt to find the truth. And Raza, being the kind of man he was, could not rest until he had done it. He would look for the passenger one more time, and this time he would find him. It was a Thursday. Raza had been driving his usual route along the commercial quarter near the city center when he saw him. He almost didn't. The man was on the opposite side of the road, walking at a moderate pace, his posture precisely as Raza remembered, upright, measured, a little formal. The collared shirt, the careful stride. He was carrying nothing this time. Raza had a passenger in the back. He dropped her at her destination 2 streets ahead, thanked her, waited for her to step out. Then he turned the car around and drove back the way he had come. He found the man standing outside a pharmacy looking at his phone. Raza pulled over. He got out of the cab, which he almost never did in the middle of a shift. He walked across the pavement. His heart was beating harder than he expected it to. "Excuse me," he said. "I think you rode in my cab a few weeks ago." The man looked up from his phone. His face was neutral, not alarmed. He looked at Raza with a kind of blank courtesy. "I may have," he said. "I take taxis sometimes." "You left something behind," Raza said. "In the back seat." A pause. Something moved across the man's face. Not guilt exactly, not surprise exactly. Something in between. Something that resolved itself almost immediately back into blankness. "Did I?" "A box," Raza said. "There was a puppy inside." The man looked at him for a moment without responding. Then he put his phone in his pocket and straightened his shirt, that same gesture Raza had seen in the rearview mirror on the day of the ride. That small, self-contained movement of composure. "Yes," he said. Just that. One word. Raza waited. "I left it there," the man said. "I didn't forget it." The words landed quietly. Not angry words. Not ashamed words. Just words, delivered in a tone that suggested the matter was, to him, factual and finished. "You left it on purpose?" Raza asked. He kept his voice even. "I had the dog for 3 days," the man said. "It was a mistake. I didn't realize what it would require. I couldn't keep it." He paused. "I thought someone would find it." "It was a week old," Raza said. "I know," the man said. "It might have died." The man did not look away. He did not look apologetic. He looked, if anything, mildly inconvenienced by the direction the conversation had taken. Is it alive? He asked. Yes, said Raza. Then it's fine, the man said simply. I'm glad you found it. He pulled his phone back out. If there are any expenses you feel I owe. No, Raza said. The word came out before he finished thinking it. The man nodded. He seemed satisfied with this outcome. He turned his attention back to his phone. Raza stood on the pavement for a moment longer looking at him. He did not say anything else. There was nothing to say that would reach the place where something like regret might live, and he wasn't sure that place existed in this man. Some people move through the world shedding things. They are not cruel in any active sense. They simply do not attach. Raza walked back to his cab. He sat behind the wheel for a long time without moving. The city continued around him. Pedestrians, noise, the distant call of a food seller. He felt the anger first, and it was clean and sharp. Then it passed, as anger does when it has nowhere to land. What came after was harder to name. He leaned over and looked at the box on the passenger seat. The puppy was sleeping, as it often did in the afternoon, curled in a loose comma shape against the folded towel. Its ears twitched once as a car passed. One paw moved. Raza watched it breathe. He thought about the man's words. I thought someone would find it. He thought about what it meant to be left in a box by someone who had decided after 3 days that you were too much, that the inconvenience outweighed whatever had made them choose you to begin with. He thought about the puppy's first night, the diluted milk, the medicine syringe, Sana's hands, the shelter visit, the formula, the late nights in the kitchen. 3 weeks of days that had quietly rearranged themselves around this small new weight. He thought about the man's face when he said, "Then it's fine," the absolute absence of doubt in that expression, and something settled in Raza's chest. Not resignation, not surrender, something more like clarity. The puppy did not need that man. It never had. What it had needed, what it still needed, was what it had already found. Someone who showed up, someone who came back, someone who did not walk away when the inconvenience arrived. Raza started the car. He had one more stop to make before he went home. He drove to the vet clinic on the far side of his neighborhood. It was time to do this properly. Whatever came next was going to need a foundation, and foundations, he knew, were built carefully, one stone at a time. The vet clinic was called Pow's, which Raza thought was perhaps too cheerful a name for a place where difficult things were sometimes decided, but he appreciated the warmth of it once he stepped inside. A young woman at the reception desk looked up when he entered with the box. He told her, briefly, what he had. She nodded with the practiced steadiness of someone who had received all kinds of arrivals through that door and asked him to wait. The veterinarian was a woman named Dr. Nadia. She was perhaps 40, with short hair and glasses, and the calm, precise manner of someone who communicated most things through their hands. She lifted the puppy out of the box with a practiced gentleness that Raza respected immediately, the kind of handling that was efficient without being indifferent. She examined it quietly. She checked the eyes, the ears, the gums. She pressed gently along the small rib cage, listened with the stethoscope, looked at the puppy's abdomen. She checked its temperature. Male, she said, more to herself than to him. Then 3 weeks, give or take. Maybe 3.5. She looked at Raza. You've been feeding it well. The weight is reasonable for the age. She paused. The early days were the critical ones. Whatever you did then, it worked. Raza told her about the syringe, the diluted milk, then the formula from the shelter. She nodded. The formula was the right decision. Milk alone is not enough. He needed the nutrients. She set the puppy down on the table and watched it for a moment as it moved its legs, testing the surface. He's small. He'll stay small, I think. Mixed breed. Hard to say what. But healthy. No signs of infection, no obvious abnormalities. She looked at Raza. What are your plans? Raza had been thinking about this all the way across the city, turning it over. The anger from the pavement had settled by now into something quieter, a kind of stillness that comes after a decision has been made, but not yet spoken aloud. I'm keeping him, he said. He had not planned to say it so plainly, but once it was said, it did not feel like a surprise. It felt like something that had always been true, waiting for him to catch up with it. Dr. Hem. Nadia did not look surprised either. She looked, if anything, unsurprised in the way someone looks when a story ends the way they expected it to. Then there are some things to know, she said. She spent the next 20 minutes going through everything with him. Feeding schedule. Gradual transition to solid food. First vaccines at 6 to 8 weeks. Deworming. What to watch for in the first months. Appetite changes, lethargy, discharge from the eyes or nose. She wrote it all down on a printed sheet with her own notes added in the margins. She also told him about socialization. He needs to be around people, she said. Different people, different environments. Not overwhelmingly, but steadily. He should not be isolated. A puppy this young. His character is forming now. What he experiences in these weeks will shape who he becomes. Raza looked at the puppy, who was sitting on the examination table with that expression all very young animals have, the one that is not quite fear and not quite trust, but the open space between them. He already rides in the cab with me, Raza said. Dr. Nadia smiled. It was a small, real smile. That should do it, she said. He paid for the visit, bought the appropriate formula and a few basic supplies from the small cabinet near the desk, and carried everything back to the car. He placed the box on the passenger seat with care. Then he sat for a moment, the supplies in a bag at his feet, and looked at the puppy. He had said it out loud now. I'm keeping him. There is a particular quality to the silence that follows a real decision. It is not the silence of uncertainty. It is the silence of something finally becoming level, like water settling after a stone is dropped. Raza recognized it. He had felt it at a few other moments in his life. The day he married Sana, the day he quit his factory job and bought his first taxi, the day his daughter was born. Moments when the future, which had been blurred and shifting, became suddenly clear. He did not have a name for the puppy yet. He had been avoiding it, as though naming him would be a kind of presumption. But now it felt appropriate. Now it felt necessary. He thought about it on the drive home. He ran through a few options, discarded them. He thought about the morning he had found the puppy, the morning light, the coolness of the air. He thought about the word that had come to him instinctively when he looked inside the box for the first time. Not panic, not pity, something simpler. Mana, he said aloud, testing it. A small word, an old word, one that meant in the language of his childhood something like little one. The puppy did not react, but Raza felt the word settle into place. Muna. He drove home through the evening traffic, one hand on the wheel, one eye on the box beside him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he did not feel like a man waiting for something to be resolved. He felt like a man driving home. That evening, Raza sat with his wife and told her the whole story from beginning to end, including the moment on the pavement. Sana listened quietly. When he finished, she reached over and petted the puppy, who was asleep between them on the kitchen floor. She said only, "You should have seen your face when you brought him home that first night." She was smiling when she said it. That was enough. The weeks after that visit settled into something Raza would later find difficult to explain but easy to remember. A new pattern. The way water finds a new path after something shifts the ground. He still drove his routes. He still knew the rhythms of the east side and the pooling roads and the silence of 5 in the evening. But now there was something different about the passenger seat. It was occupied. Mana came with him to work. This was not, at first, something Raza had planned carefully. It happened because Sana was out several mornings a week visiting her sister, and leaving Muna alone at home at that age felt wrong. So Raza brought the box, and then, as Mana grew, the box became unnecessary. He would simply settle onto the front seat beside Raza with the particular authority of a small dog who has decided this is his place. The passengers noticed immediately. Most of them liked it. People who liked dogs liked it very much. They would lean forward at the beginning of the ride, ask his name, reach out a hand. Mana was, Raza was learning, a sociable creature. Dr. Nadia had been right. The cab had turned out to be the finest education in the world for a young dog. Different faces, different voices, the city passing through the open window in a constant stream of new smells and sounds and people. Muna absorbed all of it. He was not particularly calm. He was curious. He pressed his nose against the window when traffic stopped, watching pedestrians with an expression of concentrated attention. He moved between the front seats to investigate the back when a passenger left, sniffing the seat, the floor, the door handle, cataloging everything with methodical interest. He had a habit of resting his chin on Raza's knee when the roads were quiet, which was inconvenient and which Raza never once discouraged. There were passengers who did not want the dog. This happened perhaps 4 or 5 times in the first weeks. Raza was apologetic and understanding about it. He would explain briefly that Muna traveled with him most mornings, but that he could call another cab if preferred. 3 of those passengers stayed. 2 left. He could not be unhappy about either outcome. His regulars became fond of Muna quickly. There was Mrs. Kasim, a retired teacher who rode every Tuesday to her physiotherapy appointment, and who began bringing a small treat in her bag each week, presenting it to Muna with great formality before she settled into the back seat. There was the young man named Bilal who worked at the printing shop, and who started booking Raza specifically on the days he saw the taxi at the stand, because he had told his wife about the cab dog and she wanted him to take a photograph. Raza allowed this with quiet amusement. At home, the adjustment was easy in ways he had not expected and complicated in ways he had. The easy parts, Muna was clean, as puppies go. He learned the shape of the apartment quickly, which rooms he could enter, where his sleeping spot was. He ate at consistent times and learned to wait near his bowl. He slept at night without incident, curled in the corner of the bedroom in the bed Sana had made him from an old cushion and a folded blanket. The complicated parts, he was everywhere. He followed Raza from room to room. He appeared at the bathroom door during showers. He sat at Raza's feet while Raza drank his morning tea, chin resting on the floor, eyes tracking every movement. He positioned himself between Raza and the television in the evenings, as though the correct configuration of the room required him to be in the center of it. Raza's daughter, Hira, came over on a Saturday 3 weeks after the vet visit. She had been told about Muna, but had not yet met him. She walked in and Muna went entirely still for approximately 2 seconds, assessing her. Then he approached, sniffed her shoes with great seriousness, allowed her to pet him, and immediately placed both front paws on her knees. "He likes you," Raza said. "He's tiny," Hira said. She was already scratching behind his ears. "How tiny is he going to stay?" "The vet says small," Raza said. "Good," said Hira in the tone of someone who has decided something. She visited more often after that. Raza began to understand something during those weeks that he had not known how to articulate before. He had spent much of his life being competent and responsible, driving carefully, maintaining the cab, providing for his family. These were the things he did well and consistently, and he had been satisfied with that. Competence as a form of love. But Muna required something different. Muna required attention, not efficiency, not solving, just presence. Sitting still while a small dog slept on his lap, watching out the window with him at something that turned out to be nothing, just a cat on a wall. Being the steady point around which something young and uncertain could orient itself. This was not something Raza had known he needed to practice. He was practicing it now. He did not say these things aloud. He was not that kind of man. But sometimes in the evenings when the routes were done and the cab was parked, and Muna was asleep on the cushion beside his chair, he sat very quietly and thought about the man on the pavement, the pressed shirt, the phone in the pocket. He did not feel angry anymore. He felt something closer to pity, not condescending pity, the ordinary kind, the kind you feel for someone who passed through a door without knowing it and will never get back to what was on the other side. Some things are not chosen quickly, Raza thought. Some things choose you first, and then you understand them later. Muna twitched in his sleep. His paws moved in the motion of running somewhere in a dream. Raza watched him and did not look away. The following months brought their own small complications, but they also brought the thing that had been missing for a long time, in the quiet of an apartment, in the front seat of a cab, in the spaces between a man and his ordinary days. 6 months passed. This is not a long time in the world, but inside a life, 6 months can be the distance between who you were and who you became. Muna was no longer a puppy in the helpless sense. He was still small. Dr. Nadia had been right about that. But he had grown into himself. He had a lean, compact body, long ears that one of Raza's passengers had compared to a rabbit's, and a tail that moved with the full body enthusiasm of a dog who has decided, once and for all, that the world is a reliable place. He still rode in the cab. This had not been a temporary arrangement. It had become simply the shape of their days. Raza drove. Muna sat in the passenger seat with his chin on the edge of the window or his nose pressed flat against the glass, watching the city. On rainy mornings, he lay curled on the seat with his eyes half closed, swaying gently with the movement of the car, unbothered. Tariq, at the taxi stand, had long since stopped being surprised by any of this. He had, over the months, developed a relationship with Muna that consisted almost entirely of Muna stealing a piece of his morning paratha whenever Tariq was distracted, and Tariq pretending not to notice. Your dog, Tariq told Raza one morning, not for the first time, is a thief. He's learning from the city, Raza said. Mrs. Qasim still brought the weekly treat. She had begun asking after Muna if she ever had to take a different cab. She sent a message once, "Is the dog well? You were not at the stand on Tuesday." Raza had shown Sana, and Sana had laughed. The city itself seemed to know Muna in some peripheral way, the way a neighborhood comes to know a constant presence without ever discussing it. The bread seller on the corner near the stand always had a piece of crust ready. The parking attendant across from the clinic, where Raza stopped twice a week for fuel, had taken to squatting down and letting Muna sniff his hand each time. These were small kindnesses, unconsidered and unremarkable, and they added up to something. Raza thought about this sometimes, the way a life accumulates texture not through its significant moments but through its ordinary ones. The afternoon he had found Muna felt both very close and very far away. He could remember it in precise detail. The parked cab, the quiet street, the cardboard flap, the look of those closed eyes and moving legs, the helplessness of it. He could remember the fear he had felt, a man not accustomed to feeling helpless, and the strange calm that had come almost immediately after, as though his hands had known what to do even when his mind had not caught up. He did not think about the passenger often. When he did, it was without the edge that had once been there. The man had made a choice. Raza had made a different one. That was the whole of it. He had stopped needing that story to resolve itself into something more meaningful than what it was. What it was this, a moment of thoughtlessness that had led, by accident, to something good. That happens sometimes. The world was careless, and it was also, occasionally and without planning, generous. Hira had started calling Muna her little brother, which she said in the joking tone, and which was, Raza suspected, not entirely a joke. She visited on most Saturdays now. She brought her fiancé once, a quiet man named Saif, who had not had a dog growing up and who held himself carefully around Muna at first, as though uncertain of the protocol. Within 20 minutes, Muna had climbed onto the couch beside him and fallen asleep against his leg, and Saif had looked at Raza with an expression of mild surrender. "Does he do that with everyone?" Saif asked. "Only the ones he likes," Raza said. Saif looked down at the sleeping dog with something careful and new in his expression. Raza recognized it. He had worn it himself 6 months earlier in a kitchen at midnight with a heartbeat against his thigh. He did not say anything about this. He just poured the tea. Sana had a word she used now when she described the household. She did not say our apartment or our home. She said our place, the way people say it when they mean something specific. Not just the rooms, but the feeling of the rooms. The composition of a life as it has arranged itself into warmth. Our place feels different, she had said one evening. Not to Raza directly. To no one in particular, the way people speak when they are simply observing something true. He had heard it and said nothing. But he had thought about it all the following day. There are things that arrive in your life disguised as problems. They are heavy and complicated, and they require more from you than you were planning to give. You manage them because you must. And then one morning you wake up, and they are not problems anymore. They are just part of the shape of your days. You can no longer imagine the shape without them. Raza had driven through the city for 11 years. He had watched it from behind the wheel, its moods, its light, its thousand small daily dramas. He had been a good driver and the fair man and a steady presence and a quiet witness to other people's lives. He was still all of those things. But now, in the front seat beside him, there was Muna, small, alert, ears slightly raised, watching the world with the calm confidence of a creature who has learned, through no fault of its own, that trust must be earned, and that once it is given fully. On a cool morning in November, the city just beginning to feel the edge of winter, the air carrying that particular quality of clarity that comes with the season's first real cold, Raza parked near the corner where he had found the passenger 6 months before. He had not planned to do this. He had a fare to pick up nearby, and it simply pulled over a little earlier than necessary. He sat in the car. Muna stood on the passenger seat, nose to the window, watching the street below with his usual focused attention. Raza looked at the corner. Nothing special about it now. An ordinary city corner. Shuttered shops just beginning to open. A woman carrying a basket. A boy on a bicycle. The familiar sounds of morning traffic further down. He thought of the box. The folded flap. The slow breathing. Then he looked at Muna. Muna turned from the window and looked back at him. His ears were still raised. His expression was, as always, one of steady, uncomplicated presence. "Hello," said Raza, which was perhaps a strange thing to say to a dog in the middle of the morning, but Muna received it with the gravity it deserved. Then Raza started the car, and they drove. Some dogs are abandoned on busy streets. Some in parks, some in boxes in the back seats of taxis by people who had already moved on before they ever arrived. But sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes there is someone in the right place at the right time, someone unhurried enough to notice, steady enough to stay. Muna did not know that he had been left. He knew only that, very early in his life, he had learned the warmth of certain hands, the particular sound of a specific engine, the feeling of belonging to someone who came back. That is, perhaps, the most important thing any of us can know. If this story stayed with you, if it slowed you down for a little while and reminded you of something quiet and true, please share it with someone who might need it today. Every small act of care matters. Every animal deserves to be seen. Thank you for watching until the end. It means more than you know.